Hi, I'm Barbara Shapiro, and I'm Donna Potter's mom.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you guys a few questions and you guys can answer. So my first question is, where did our family come from?
This
Ireland and Italy.
island in Italy. I'm glad she's awake.
So what part of that is from your family and then what part's from Grandpa's family?
Grandpa's family was from Russia and from Poland. My part was from Ireland, and where else was
Italy.
I from? Italy. I don't know why I want to put that out of my mind.
I don't know either.
Italy's the best part. I pride
Yeah.
myself on being Italian. Okay. And then so how do we know that this is where we're from? Like how do you know that?
How do I know that?
Yeah.
You want to start with
Well,
your side?
my side is my uh, husband's mother was born in Poland, was born in Warsaw, and came over while she was when she was 16. So I know that. His
She's a
Frank's father's was born in Russia, and I know that because he came over about 10 years before from Russia to Canada, and then
No, it was way longer than 10 years because he came. He
Wait a
was
minute, yes, it
escaping
was.
the pogroms,
yeah, that's
and
right.
so when he and his brother came to Canada, it was during the pogroms, and then he met his first wife.
Yeah,
They had their 5 kids together, and then separated, and he came to Boston, and that's where he met Grandma, and that would have been so he was in Boston for 10 years before
yeah, that
he met Grandma.
that's right. She's right. I'm wrong.
Do you want the scandal?
Sure.
Well, it was very scandalous because Grandma was coming because
Not that grandma.
no, Grandma Rose, my grandma, was sort of a rebel, and so she came across from Poland in a ship by herself, came to Boston, did not get along with her dad, who had already come over here. He had left with their nanny, I think it was, to establish a household here, and then decided to stay with the nanny instead. So there's that scandal. And then he and Grandma didn't get along, Grandma Rose. So there was a scandal there. She left and met a man who was the same age as her father, who was then Grandpa Shapiro's dad. So he was a businessman in Boston, and she married him. So he was a generation older than her.
He owned a box company, right? In
That's right.
Boston.
Yep.
And so Grandma Rose Grandma Rose had siblings in Canada? Or is that no, her husband had another
children.
family in
Right.
Canada.
Exactly.
And so how did
Grandma Rose had a brother
Uh-huh.
who was in Boston, right?
No, when she came over at age 16, it was a little later on because she came over just with her mother, and her mother went back.
Oh, I thought she came by herself.
No, no, her mother. I remember now. She went to. Her mother brought her over to get away from the Padum or something. I don't know, to get away from something. They because in Russia they were very, very wealthy, and then they
In
were
Poland.
poor. Poland, they were very, very wealthy, and they just they had to leave real quick.
So that was the.
So why did we have to leave?
Well, it was the revving up. It was so World War I had ended, and it was the revving up to World War II, and people were not liking Jews, and so they
And we
thought
were
it was going to
Jews.
be, and we were Jews, and so they thought it would be safer to be in the United States, so they were reestablishing themselves here.
So did that help save a big part of our family from moving way earlier?
Well, not as much as it should have, because most of the family ended up staying back in Poland, and they all died in Auschwitz.
So on that note, how many generations can we trace back from I guess
It would just to trace back. Well, it would be your grandfather
right.
and no, your great grandfather. What is it?
So
Your
Grandpa
grandpa.
Shapiro's
Yeah.
parents
What are their
their
names?
parents.
Yeah.
So
And no further, because
Right,
they were
that's it.
killed.
yeah, so
But
Rose,
that was the entire family was wiped out
Right.
in Auschwitz.
Right.
Brothers, sisters, everybody.
everybody that lived in Poland. Was
So if you can go back to Grandpa Shapiro, so my grandfather,
Mhm.
what were his parents' names,
Rose and Harry.
and where were their places of birth? So they were both born in Poland.
No,
No.
Harry was born in Russia.
Okay,
Harry was born in Georgia, at that time was part of Russia.
and then Rose was born in Poland.
Warsaw.
Okay, and then can you go farther back than that? Or
No.
We know that her mom's name was Sarah.
That's it. So everyone else was still in Poland and Russia, and then died in Auschwitz.
We know-
Grandpa with Harry,
Yes,
and then she got married
Yeah,
more
then
times
Harry died.
because he was old.
he was old.
He
Yeah.
was old, yeah. And
He died when Grandpa Shapiro was 12.
Okay, and Grandpa Shapiro has a brother.
Right, Victor.
And how much older is he than Grandpa?
13 years.
Okay, so let's switch from Grandpa and go to your family. So, back from you, how far can we trace back? Can you remember?
Just to the fact that my family came from Naples. There are still some there, or were when I was younger. And my grandmother and my grandfather were both from Naples. And they came over on the boat
With 4 of their
with
kids.
4 of their kids. And then they had, because there was 7 of them after a while. They had a couple of kids here, like my dad. And
Mhm. Right, Joseph was the first one.
Yeah.
Her father was the first one born in the United States.
So, your dad was Joseph and your mother was.
Eileen.
I thought it was Del.
Eileen Delaquila.
Oh, is that what you called her grandma Del?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then, do you know, like, your grandparents were born in Naples. Do you know their names? Like,
only the last name of my grandfather, which was Delaquila.
So you don't know his parents' names?
No.
do you know? well,
The women really didn't count. You know, they
Mhm.
would just sort of, whatever,
Mhm.
they always call them by their first names and not their last names. They didn't.
It was a big Italian family.
so they were all from Naples?
They were, the oldest 4 were from Naples, and then the parents kept having, they came over here in a big Catholic family, lots more kids.
Okay, that's interesting. So, do we have any veterans in our family? Like, did any of our relatives fight in wars?
Oh, yeah.
What are their names?
Okay. There was Raymond Folk, who was my mother's younger brother, and he was a Marine. There was Uncle Charlie, who was Aunt Ann. She was my mother's sister, Ann. Was my mother's sister, and it was her husband who fought in the army, for the army, I should say, I guess. And Victor,
Oh, right.
was a Navy man.
So Victor was on Grandpa Shapiro's side, and the Uncle Charlie was, so Grandma Dell had 2 sisters, Anne and Phoebe, were the Irish sisters. They're the daughters of Mary and Tom Folk.
Folk. Oh, Brady.
Which one comes first?
Brady came first.
Okay, so the Bradys were in Ireland.
Ireland, yeah.
They came here.
Yeah. But I think Grandma knew my her future husband over in Ireland, and that's
Mhm.
why they married so soon.
Okay,
they
because I know
more
that
than
there were 2 different generations that had Bradys in them.
Yeah.
There was somehow we ended up with that name twice. So there's 2 generations of Brady.
There are a lot of Brady is like the Smith here,
Okay. Okay.
so that's where I think the mix-up
Yeah.
got.
Yeah. So it's Brady Folk.
Yeah.
So we can trace back more generations on the Irish side than anywhere else. That's the bottom line.
Okay. So we can only go back
We've got
2 generations on Grandpa's side,
yeah.
Right.
and like a lot with yours, like 4.
Four.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question: Can you tell me any stories about our family? Any interesting stories that you think should go in this beautiful documentary?
I think the most interesting story is Grandma and Grandpa's story.
You want to tell me?
So Grandma and Grandpa were both from New York City. So they were both living in the same neighborhood.
This is going to sound stupid, but the Catholics seemed to be mostly on the left-hand side, and the Jews were on across the street on the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like what they called a ghetto.
Your parents were from the United States. They were born here.
Yes,
And
Grandma.
So Grandma Dell's parents were born here, but Grandpa Dell's parents were still like first generation Italian.
Right.
And so they lived across the street, so they met when they were 7 years old, and started dating when they were how old?
Actual dating was 16. I knew him from the time I was 7, but we didn't date until we were 16. And everybody said, don't worry about it, because at that time, the religions did not mix, and marry. It was just not done. And as it turned out, your grandpa and I just changed the rules.
Mm-hmm.
When did
What
you
did the
guys
church
get
think about that?
They were very upset. I was excommunicated. Now they wouldn't even think about that anymore.
Mhm.
It doesn't. So it was just the priest who was in charge of the church who'd be the one to say, that's it, you can't come to church, you can't receive the sacraments, nothing, if you marry a Jew.
So when did you guys get married?
When we were 21,
What year was that?
58, yeah, 58.
And so did you have to convert after?
No, that's a funny story. Your grandfather was Jewish in name only at age 18. Well, by this time, both families were accepting the fact that, yeah, we were going to get married, and that was it. Well, my mother-in-law kept telling me, she was up visiting my mother, because they were very friendly. And they were both saying, whatever you do, don't fight with him tonight. And because I must have been in a bad mood all day or something.
So they knew he was going to propose.
And they knew he had the ring. He didn't know he didn't know that I was in a bad mood. And he came upstairs and we got into an argument. And he just up and left. And he's going and I'm yelling down at him, where are you going? And he says, oh, by the way, congratulations. I said, for what? He says, you just got yourself engaged. And he threw the ring at me. He threw the ring at me. And that was my engagement. That was one of the funny stories we got. There were so many of them that.
Do you have any funny stories about Aunt Peggy, your sister?
Oh, yes.
Okay, tell me a funny story, and then I have one more question.
Okay. With my sister, when she was little, she got the whooping cough. And I guess my mother didn't realize how bad it was, but one morning she went to bed, she was fine. The next morning, she got up and her eyes were crossed because she had coughed so hard. She had broken something, and the eyes crossed. So she took her to the doctors and then she took her to the big hospital that was in New York, Presbyterian Medical Center over in Manhattan, and she had her examined, and they said, well, they could do surgery on her, and I think she had about 4 surgeries, and she wore little gold glasses, but when she would take them off at night, she'd walk into the walls because she couldn't judge. She was only a little kid, and she'd walk into a wall, or no matter what she did, where she went. So I used to have to take her by the hand, and get her where she was going.
My last question is, do we have any genealogical records? And if we do, where are they?
Nothing from Grandpa.
We've looked for Grandma Rose's stuff.
Yeah, she
and
does
we've
it.
got, Aunt Belle had some, so she kept all of the family records from Canada, but they were very disorganized, so we don't know what they mean. So we have people's death certificates and birth certificates, but we have no idea who they are. And they have, like, when we've tried to compare, like, the names on certain ones, things don't match up. So we have this pile of records, but we don't know what they are. And then we know that in Italy, there's a castle, there's a Dell'Aquila
Oh,
castle.
yeah.
We have a castle in Italy?
Well, we don't have a castle in Italy, but there's a castle in Italy that has our name. So
No, what it was my family had a castle. My family in Italy was,
low on the totem pole of royalty, but like
So
But-
we're royalty
wow.
in Italy with a
Yeah.
castle?
wait a minute, let's
generations and
finish.
generations ago.
So, the castle passed down as each generation grew, but in between all that, there was lots of wars. Italy had wars with a lot of people around her, and then we had this castle would pass from one to the other, back and forth. And what happened was during World War II, my father got the bill for the castle.
Oh.
Because they were trying to raise money, I guess. They wanted to sell the castle. The castle had been, bombed in certain spots, and it would have cost an enormous amount of money to redo it. So my father asked, was there any other thing that was, left so they could keep the Dell'Aquila name? And they said yes. There was. You could give the castle to be an orphanage for the children. And my father said, that's what I'll do. And so he gave the castle. And I've got a little thing I can show you, a bookmark. When Aunt Sue went to Italy, she went over there, and she happened to spot this in one of these gift shops. And it's a bookmark, and it's got my name, our last name on it, our family name.
Well, thank you guys for talking. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Welcome.
Yay.